I'm Mychal. I'm a sommelier, tarot card reader, and former ballerina.
Hi, I'm Suzanne. I'm a writer, an author, and a podcaster.
And this is All the Woo, A to Z.
Seasonette 3, Episode 2, Pyramids.
Egypt.
Pyramids. Because the pyramids are in Egypt.
Yes,
Egyptian
they are.
pyramids.
If you did not know, that is where they are located. At least the ones that we're going to be talking about are located.
The Giza Plateau.
Yes.
Most specifically, I think.
Yeah, probably.
There are lots of other pyramids, but we're going to focus on the big three.
Yes. So before we get started, as always, we want to invite you to our table, which is actually real now, not necessarily metaphorical, but for you it would be metaphorical.
Can you hear that? That's a real table, people. Real table.
Real table. We're very excited. We're moving up in the world. But beyond that, just to remind you, we are hoping to create a non-judgmental space where we are sharing our own personal experiences and information, knowledge, insight on these topics. So we, at the very least, hope that you are entertained.
Awesome. So what deliciousness are we drinking tonight?
So today we're actually going to have an Egyptian wine, which
color?
Is red. So producer for this one is the name of the producer. This person I don't think is still alive.
And probably, as a good Muslim, was not really into wine.
Yes. So Omar Khayyam red wine, which the grape that they're using for this is Bobal. And Bobal is traditionally a grape that you'd find in Spain, specifically the warmer regions of Spain.
All the ones that used to be formerly Muslim.
Correct. So it does really well in that kind of atmosphere and climate, as would make sense. So it's actually just a really simple, easy drinking styled red wine as far as
We're working on that part. Yeah.
Yes. They're not, currently they don't make a whole lot of wine, even though historically they've made quite a few wines in their history for Egypt, but not so much a huge part of their culture anymore.
Yes. And as Egypt gets more conservative and more of their tourism comes from other Muslim countries, I imagine it will go down even a little bit more.
Perhaps.
It'll always be gin.
Yeah, that's true. Anyway, I would imagine that if you were interested in trying this, it would be a little difficult to find. I am just going to throw that out there.
So speaking of Egyptian wines that we both sampled when we were there, we are going to turn this around a little bit, gentle listener. We are going to talk about our personal experiences with the pyramids.
The pyramids.
So, Mychal, what was your expectation? Because, P.S., we've both been to Egypt. So what was your expectation when you reached the plateau? How did you feel when you saw them for the first time?
All the things. It was literally like one of my first stops. So the first day I was there is just kind of locked up in my hotel because my hotel was not in a good walkable area of town in Cairo.
And also she, bless your little pointed head, visited Egypt
by
during
myself.
COVID.
During COVID on my own. So I didn't.
She had a tour company or group.
Right. So I didn't want to go out on my own without the tour group. I figured my hotel is being currently, secured. It is probably not recommended that I go walk about. So I didn't really do anything outside of the hotel before. So this was our first stop as a group, was to go to the pyramids. And I was, first of all, very worried about not coming back in time or getting lost and the tour going off without me. First, I secured that fear. I'm like, okay, who's my person who's going to make sure that they're looking to make sure that I'm there? Please. Okay. So then we get there. Very surreal. The entire time I was in Egypt altogether, I felt this way where it was kind of like a weird feeling of, I have been here. I'm so normalized to the imagery, expectation of what it looks like. The only thing was difference is that your sense of place, putting it in the place yourself, when you drive up to it, where you're kind of coming from, how you're looking at it that way. That was different about seeing where tourists kind of come in. My group was very adamant about talking about what you can and cannot do once you're inside, because I had a special ticket to go inside. I'm like, if I've made it this far, there's no way I'm not going to go and pay the extra money to go inside the pyramid. Like, that's happening. So I made my way in, and the Grand Gallery, which you see a lot of images of, you can Google what it looks like. Looks like it's fairly disorienting when you kind of look at it in pictures. Like, it's hard to tell whether or not you're looking up or you're looking down. Like, you can tell it's at an angle, but you can't tell exactly where you are in this angle.
And to be fair, you can look up and then you can turn around and look down because it's at an angle.
Correct. But when you're looking at pictures, it's really hard to kind of see that. And also to give you more, like, how do I fit in this space? How big is this space around me? And so walking through the Grand Gallery up to the King's Chamber, which is the main part of where you go, it's very close quarters, people coming and going. And there's really only room for like one person, either direction, and not even either direction, just one person in general. So it's a bit of a shimmy around. And just even looking at the stones that line the inside of the gallery, like, I made a point of really kind of looking at those. Those rocks are so tightly aligned. I would say that it far surpasses any kind of masonry work that I've seen to this day, as far as how tight and still how sharp those edges are. They're very super 90-degree angle, very sharp and specific. Anyway, climbing in, completely different feeling. I wanted to be able to have time and space to kind of sit there and like take it in, but based upon what I was kind of told, I wasn't allowed to kind of spend my time there the way that I wanted to. And so I was really kind of bummed out about that. I would love to, in a future date, go with a group that has the kind of the pyramid to their self and be able to spend time to do that. I think I would have a much different experience. But in it, I can tell you that looking at I'm putting in air quotes, the sarcophagus that's in there, unless the person's like 3 foot something, like, they're not going to fit. And I realized that probably weren't as tall as we are now, but at the same time, I don't know that they were that small.
I don't know. Ramses, I think, was supposed to be like, that's
4'2".
6'1".
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, people want to say, oh, well, people were smaller. I'm like,
no, not really.
This would have to be a super, super tiny person.
Kings. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll tell you that from like just personal perspective. But I definitely had a different feeling physically while I was in there. And
this is where we're getting to the woo, people.
Yeah, the woo part. So as I was making my way out, because eventually I had to come out because I was out of time. Time limit, so many reasons.
You cannot camp in the King's Chamber.
Correct. Have to leave at some point. Want to make sure that my door wasn't taking off without me. So all the things. And I came out and I was physically shaking, like vibrating, shaking, very weak. My legs were super, super weak and shaking. Like, I was having a hard time standing and walking about once I exited the pyramid. So yes, that was my experience. And then in kind of walking around and seeing also how many other structures are around there outside of the 3 big and the 3 small ones that you see images of. A lot of people don't kind of show that there's other structures that are around there too.
Yeah.
Outside the Sphinx. Suzanne?
So I've been twice. The first time was after, at that time, the worst sandstorm in modern history.
Fun.
So the sky was approximately the color of the pyramids. And there was a tourist ahead of me as we were going in who had a claustrophobia attack.
That would be a bad place to have a claustrophobia
and just
attack.
Completely freaked out and turned around and ran past and kind of threw me almost against the wall off that little ramp.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my experience of the first time. The second time, which was just a couple of years ago, I'm just going to say that the pyramids are big business. The pyramids have always been big business.
Yes.
So if you think you can go to the pyramids alone and not be
Harassed.
and not end up spending more than you had intended to.
Yes.
You are,
sadly mistaken.
Julius Caesar was taking advantage of that. I mean, like, it's part of it. But as an example of how something that seems so negative could become so positive, my husband and I somehow thought we were going to escape all of this because we came in by subway. And so we were just going to get a taxi because we weren't with a tour group or whatever. But of course, the taxi is one of the guys from the pyramid who knows this is what you're going to do. And so we ended up riding by camel to the pyramids.
From where?
Which brings you from the opposite side of where the entrance is. So you can't see the Sphinx at all.
Right.
And it is amazing what a timeless moment it is, because you are just, it looks like in a sea of sand.
Yes.
And you see the pyramids, and you see, off to the side, the little encampments of various and assorted people. But the Egyptian government has quite a bit of space around the pyramids that is part of that tourist attraction. And so we came up on camels, and I have to say it was one of the most magical experiences of my life. Now, I was a little bit concerned that my camel was trying to bite me.
So
felt very unfair because I adore camels, and this camel was a bit mad. And my husband, who was, riding ahead of me, he was trying to keep from, because the camel was biting his camel too. So he was.
Your camel was not having a good day.
My camel was in menopause. So yes. And, we got amazing photographs because we were with, people who know that that's what tourists do.
Yep.
So there was one particular moment where I thought I might have a heart attack because we're standing on the edge of like a gulch, if you will. It's probably a 16 or 20 foot drop.
Yeah.
And so he gets my husband to stand on top of his camel, on his saddle, and get his picture taken. And my brain is immediately going into, when he falls, who do I call? What is it? The State Department? Is it like the embassy? Like,
what do we do?
Yeah. So I don't think I enjoyed that moment quite as much, but I really, really love the picture. But actually getting into the pyramids for me, because I had written a story about what it was like to climb the pyramids, because I specifically bought the movie Death in the Nile to see how they got to the top of the pyramids, because you always see the pictures of it looks like people are just scampering up like steps somewhere. And in fact, each stone is as tall as I am.
Yeah, you have to be a pretty proficient climber if you were to do it, because not that the stones are necessarily taller than you, but they're pretty close to normal average person height. So it would be a serious workout to make your way up.
And there are, in the hotel that we stayed at, which had a view of the pyramids, they had the cafe. It was a very 1920s kind of thing. They had the cafe wall covered in photographs of the aristos who used to be taken up by Egyptians who would like climb and then just yank them from one to the other. And then they would go to the top and have tea.
Can you imagine how buff those Egyptians were who were helping them up?
Who probably were eating 600 calories a day. I don't know, but and like how many, but also at a time where it was like there were only so many places you could touch a woman. Yeah, so some dislocated shoulders, I don't know. But so I was kind of looking at that. And again, to your point of just how seamlessly they're put, and when I was there before with a guide, and he was like, you can't even put a piece of paper between these.
Yeah,
and then he demonstrated, and you can't. So just amazing technology that established them. But also, as someone who grew up going to castles and palaces and all of that kind of thing, there's a lot of places where you can go in real life, and it's kind of like, oh, Okay.
Like a disappointing.
Yeah. It's like, oh, I thought it would be bigger.
Looks bigger in the pictures. Yeah.
The pyramids is one of those places on Earth where you're just like, I can't actually fathom
It's hard.
how big and how just amazing they are.
From walking around them, I can say that they're almost
Which is a couple miles walk, y'all.
Yeah, like I could only walk around like two sides of the Great One. Like that's all that I had time for. And that was a long walk. But even at that, when it ended, it almost seemed strange that I had reached the end and was that because it seemed so vast, it seemed so strange that it had an end at the same time. I too did the camel ride, but it wasn't to the pyramids. It was after.
Okay.
It was set up by my tour people because they were like, there's going to be people who are going to try to sell you the camel ride.
We might as well just go ahead and participate, which is what I would say if you're going to Egypt. Just accept that it's going to be amazing and get on the camel.
Get on the camel, and they take you down to the other side, where it's away from all of the modern day Cairo happenings that are around. And it's basically the edge of the Sahara Desert, which is also just mind-blowing within itself. You're like, I don't want to keep going that direction. That seems like a bad idea. But I was also really surprised. My camel liked me. I made friends with the camel. One of the other camels came over and kept on trying to rub its face on my leg. Mm-hmm. Not biting, just like rubbing. So I'm sure a scent thing. But I was really surprised by having been there for the first time. Sand is different. The quality of sand is different everywhere. And I was curious. I'm like, I'm wondering if I'm imagining the quality of the sand the way that it is. And I was really, I'm like, okay, all right.
That you were imagining it correctly.
I was imagining it correctly. Yes. So I was like, okay, all right. I will take that. Yes. Cool. Also, for those of you who are doing the tourist thing, if you want to go, if you go with a tour group, listen to your tour group leader, because they'll typically tell you all the things to kind of avoid everybody trying to sell you things and people overcharging for different things as well.
But also bear in mind that even if you are overcharged, what is overcharged for you is just a significantly beneficial charge for the person who is asking for it. So, whatever, don't get proud, just...
True. But I'm going to say that as far as like if you wanted to buy like souvenir kind of things there, the quality there might not be as good as some other places.
You do want to go to the state-sponsored souvenir shops.
Yeah.
Where they have a degree of quality control.
Yeah. Anyway.
But yes, so it's not that the pyramids weren't woo and magical for me. I was much more about the temples and Alexandria. So the pyramids were amazing and mind-blowing. And I think it's one of those things that, for the most part, when we think about pyramids, we can't actually fathom them. So it just becomes kind of a place saver, like a zero in our equations. And so you think you know what a pyramid is, and then you see them and they just keep getting bigger and you just can't fathom it.
Especially if you think about this is one of the first structures that this culture created to like just even say, hey, we're here. Like, okay, so Suzanne, there's so many theories about how and why the pyramids were built, the three specifically that we are talking about on the Giza Plateau. What are your own personal theories on this?
So, as you know, I'm not anti-woo, but I think this is one of those cases where it's really about human ingenuity that we, at this point in history, just can't grant anybody else was smarter or more technologically advanced, even though there are three structures out there that, even the finest engineers in Japan who've spent years trying to figure it out can't figure out how the pyramids were put together. So years ago, I came across a book by somebody basically who works inventing cement.
Okay.
And he had a spectacular theory of the way that this all worked was that they were actually casting the stone.
Mm-hmm.
And so they didn't need the 4-mile long ramp. They didn't need the 200,000 men heaving giant stones. They didn't need to hew the stones out because they were forming them.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at the requests that they make of Pharaoh of specific, especially salts and acids
Mm-hmm.
that are just like otherwise like, what are you people eating? But it's kind of mixed in with, their menu of the food they were requesting, but also the supplies they needed. It makes so much sense. So this guy's name, the book is The Pyramids: An Enigma Solved. And it is by Dr. Joseph Davidovits.
Mm-hmm.
And I found it to be like the answer, especially since, as we discussed, pyramid stone technology kind of devolved as the centuries of Egyptian civilization continued, and it was almost like they lost the secret of how to do it, and then they did have to start like hacking at stone,
yes,
as opposed to being able to mix it and put it in whatever shape they needed.
Which is why you'd have to make smaller stones to make it easier to,
move them. Yeah.
Make them, move them, all the things.
Yeah. So that is my favorite theory. And it's no woo.
I guess a little bit of woo, depending on how they go about making the cement, right?
I guess that's true. And also the really underlying woo is, where did you learn how to do this?
Yeah, also very woo.
Very woo.
Just came out of the sky and we thought about all this. Well, you have mentioned this to me before, and I know that ancient alien theorists like to say that, or point out that in Peru, there's a temple, I think, please don't get mad at me if I get this wrong, I think it's Pumapunku is the site, where there's also very large stone structure there that has been there since before the people who currently live there. They say it wasn't us, it was the people who were here before. And the theory is that very similar, where it was like they had stones, and because it fits all together very precisely in the same way, that they had melted the stone down and formed the stone that way. So if you think of it,
sounds like cement to me.
Yeah, like similar technology, especially if you can see things mirrored and in similar structures, right, that have the same unique qualities. There's probably something there. That there's some kind of connection.
So what's your favorite theory? She's sorting through all the options out there, which there is actually people who believe that the pyramids were not built by tens of thousands of slaves and an angry pharaoh, and giant ramps are often called pyramidiots.
Yeah,
because we believe things outside the norm.
Right.
And yes, oftentimes your Egyptian tour will have at least one or two people who, are wearing gemstone necklaces and dancing around. And,
like myself.
And they will be referred to as the pyramidids.
Yes. Well, so I can get why Egyptologists kind of come up with this ramp idea, or like that they just put up a bunch of not stone, like sand, and then like dug out the sand. Like there's a lot of different ideas, or, using clay and water. I was like, clay and water makes just mud. It's not necessarily like a slick surface to really move as. There's a lot of, in my mind, I'm like, I'm not really down with, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
And also, the Egyptians were very clear about showing the technology, quote unquote, that they did have by all of the paintings on all of the, tomb walls. And most of the things that Egyptologists have said are their things aren't portrayed there.
Yeah, there's a lot
They're Roman techniques.
Correct. And also, it's assuming that they had a lot of access to wood that is not readily that available in their area.
Egypt, not really known for wood.
Yes. So there's a lot of holes where I feel like I'm not necessarily behind that as being the most efficient way of doing the pyramids. And I would think that a culture like that put that much kind of
Imhotep, he was efficient.
would be efficient in whatever it is that they were doing. Also keeping in mind that if their technology was much more advanced at that time than what we currently are using for our own methods of building, I haven't fully settled on one that I'm like, yeah, 100%. I think it's like a mixture of different kinds of ideas.
She's getting ready to suggest the idea that my mermaids use for building things.
Oh, am I?
Yeah.
What's that method? I don't know.
No, say what you're going to say.
So I think there's something with frequency.
Yep.
That
because if you're going to be a mermaid and you need to build something, what do you have?
Yep.
Your voice.
You got your voice. And there are other cultures that lean to this idea of being able to combat gravity with frequency. And even now our technology is showing that this is possible.
This is making Wicked take on a whole other aspect.
But even, as far as like going about it, I think that an architect had come up with this other idea that they built it from the inside out instead of down up, which I also think is a more efficient way of doing it.
And one of the reasons why people say things like that is because the sarcophagus that is inside the king's chamber is bigger than anything that could have gotten in from any of the potential openings.
Yeah, it wasn't brought in after the fact. It was very intentionally
built
apart.
Around.
Yes, exactly. So there's a lot of different ideas as far as that is concerned. I'm not...
Of course, the stone that's hanging over that is like 26,000 tons or something like that, and is just one gigantic piece.
Yeah. I do also think that there was better technology than copper chisels to try to make very, huge stones exceptionally precise to fit like a puzzle piece. That also doesn't really add up to me in my mind, especially because copper's not that strong.
Was it called the Copper Age? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So I'm still not 100% sold on any one thing. I think it maybe was a combination of different ideas, but not necessarily. I'm not on this train of the aliens built it, because that definitely takes away from this idea that there was technology that was better then. It's not to say that we all know I'm a believer in aliens. I think that...
She's got them on our t-shirt.
Yeah, if they had involvement, which I'm not ruling that out, but I think if it was more about, hey, let us just give you the math and technology to utilize, and then you take it from there. I don't think it was, you guys sit back. We got this. We're going to build this all ourselves.
Or we're going to make you do this for us in some way, which I feel like that's another direction the alien thing goes.
Yes.
Although I will say, as a person, if somebody handed me the math and the chemistry to put together, anything, I would just be kind of like going, is there a God for this? Could we please have an ibis-headed, very wise God who's going to interpret all this for us?
That would be great. Yes. Yeah. So, and I have another very woo thing, but it's a little bit more in depth, and we're kind of coming up on our time, so it'll have to come up on another episode somehow.
So we will be talking more Egypt in the next episode of All the Woo,
A to Z.
Thanks for joining.